Imagine growing up your entire life feeling like something isn't right. Imagine being a girl or a boy feeling like you identify with the opposite gender later on in life. This happens to 7% of children each year. 7% of children born annually are faced with this life-altering condition before they're able to walk, speak, or think fully. Ori Turner, which will be mentioned later in the speech, was born female, but given the ultimate decision by her parents to decide her gender later on in life. Although she was born female at age 11, she made the decision to transition into male. Her parents' decision ultimately made that much easier for her transition. According to Sarah Preeves, the author of The Contested Self, Intersexuality and Sexuality, being labeled as a misfit by peers, family members, or medical staff and treatment facilities is no doubt a challenge to one's identity, development, and stability. So what exactly is intersex? According to PlannedParenthood.org, intersexuality is the general term used for a variety of situations in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the boxes of female or male. Some doctors do surgeries to decide the gender at birth, and there are many different subcategories of intersex, such as CIA and AIS and many others. Now that we know what it means to be classified as intersex, let's look at the processes of the surgeries. Gender surgery is decided by parents and doctors at the time of the birth, and a clinical psychologist must be involved from the beginning. The goal of the surgery is to restore the sexual and reproductive health of the child, because in history, the most important thing when a child is born is to be able to reproduce eventually. So what is CIH? CIH stands for congenital adrenal hyperplasia. This is a genetic disorder that helps classify the severity of intersex. According to MayoClinic.org, CAH is a group of genetic conditions limiting hormone production of adrenal. CAA is typically treated with hormone replacement and sometimes reconstructive therapy. Okay. Another syndrome is the AIS, or adrenal insensitive syndrome. According to the Mayo Clinic, this is a condition that results in the partial or complete inability of the cell to respond to androgens. This occurs mostly in males, and the males who experience this typically have female features. This is treated with estrogen replacement therapy and is also chosen by parents. Now that we have a more clear understanding of a complex subject such as intersexuality, let's move on to why performing these surgeries can sometimes be physically, psychologically, and emotionally detrimental to a child's life. Back to Ori Turner. As I already stated, Ori Turner was born female, and her parents were given the option to go through with the surgery at birth. Although that would have been the most ideal situation, and they were persuaded in much ways to do so, they ultimately let her make the decision later on in her life. At age 11, Ori Turner began to feel the male hormones in her body and decided to identify as a non-binary. She did not receive therapy, and she grew up feeling accepted, acknowledged, and understood by her peers, her doctors, and her parents. According to Sarah Creighton, the author of the Royal Journal, there is no indicators in infancy about gender or sexual orientation later in life, whether a child has an intersex condition or not. This is important because at birth, most doctors mislead parents by fabricating that they can tell a child's future sexual preference. As stated earlier, from the beginning of this process, a psychologist has to be involved. That's not necessary because there is absolutely no indicator at a child's birth what they'll identify as they get older. So that the psychologist is kind of there for just show. Another case of this that did not end so well was David Reimer. David Reimer was born a male, but his parents decided for him to identify as a female. At the birth, he was born with the penis of a man, and his parents decided to have that removed, but the doctors botched it, so the surgery was not successful, and it was still there, but it was severely disformed. Eventually, David decided that he did want to be a male, but the surgery that botched his penis made it much harder for him to have relationships and have self-confidence and not be made fun of by anybody who might have known that information. He struggled with this mental illness his entire life, with the aftermath of the surgery and not being accepted. Eventually, by the age of 24, David Reimer did commit suicide. In conclusion, there are many different reasons why parents should not have the ultimate decision on an intersex child's personal identification. The surgical treatment to pick between genders can cause, in some cases, severe mental and physical distress. In cases such as David Reimer's, that decision was not worth his life or his mental health. I hoped for the duration of my speech I was able to persuade you to think less selfishly and more in the way of the future of intersexuality and those affected by the intersex condition.